Wherever you are on your leadership voyage, it starts here.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Leadership Voyage, the podcast dedicated to your pursuit of becoming a great leader. My name is Jason Wick, your host. Happy to be back. Oh, I can give you all the usual excuses like too much work and spring break and all this kind of stuff. But also I want to add on top an extra excuse because that sounds fun. This third installment of the 3 episodes related to engagement inspired by Gallup's report, it just felt really important. And yes, I was distracted with all the other usual things. It's been over 2 months. But I do want to say I didn't want to rush to just put one out there because I said I would. I'd rather to wait and provide the right approach to what I wanted to get out here. So this is the third part of a 3-part series. I said I was going to focus on this for, approximately quarter 1. Well, we're into quarter 2 now. Okay, whatever. And this is the part that gets into the human side of things, the human connection side of things, the communication side of things. And I want to recap because it has been a couple of months, and some of you probably didn't hear the first episode or 2 of this season either. But I want to give a quick high-level recap of what this whole 3-part section was about, and I'm going to do that in just a second. Because I'd love to reiterate, I'd love to hear from you all. startyourvoyage@gmail.com. Reach out to me anytime. There's also a little link in the show notes, wherever you're looking on your phone or podcast player, Spotify on your computer, whatever you happen to be using. You can tap on your phone, text Jason, and you can send me your thoughts about this as well. So reach out via email or text. Both work great. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to skip right to it. It's been too long. So really, where are we at? This was all inspired by Gallup's report about engagement. And the big picture is a reminder that 8 million people are less engaged in the United States than they were a year ago. And not a year ago, than over the last several years. And it's held firm with last year, which is not a good thing. We are at record lows for the last decade plus when it comes to engagement in the U.S. And the bummer is the U.S. is actually one of the higher countries. So we've got an engagement problem. Something we covered in the last episode was clarity around role and what great looks like makes it far more likely that your employees will be engaged. So if they know what great looks like, if they understand expectations, there's a 4x multiplier on engagement. When people don't understand what's expected of them or what great looks like, about 20% engaged. When they do understand what great looks like, 80% engaged. And the purpose of this episode is to not give you all the stats all over again about the engagement report. It's not to rehash what we talked about in February as it relates to how to engage your employees. It's now to talk about who. That even if an employee knows what to do, and you get that engagement boost, they probably won't be excellent if they feel anonymous, if they feel uncared for, any of those things. And that reminds me of former guest Zach Mercurio and Mattering, which is how important it is to help people understand that what they're doing matters. Right? He talks about simple examples like custodial staff and mentioning to them, hey, the restroom looks great. Thanks for cleaning it up. Or someone brings a food delivery to your doorstep, and rather than saying drop at the doorstep, contactless delivery, rather than choosing that, answering the door, taking the food from them and saying, thank you so much for bringing this delivery to me on time. I really appreciate it. Just the little things that help people matter. Know that their work matters. So that's what this episode's about. It's a transition. Rather than focusing on what to do, how to set expectations, how to get folks more engaged, it's now talking about who those folks are and making sure that we are meeting them with a degree of humanness, I suppose is a way to say it. Okay? So this episode, as with almost every one of the Leadership Voyage episodes, is for managers, leaders in the workplace. But those of you who lead informally or who are contributors, it applies to you too. Think in reverse. How can you help your manager navigate better? Or how can you be a better leader wherever you are? So, let's talk about the basic need for care. In this Gallup report, there's a 13-point drop, specifically among Gen Z and millennials, younger millennials, when it comes to feeling that their supervisor cares about them as a person. Isn't that sad? You're the supervisor, you're the manager, you are directing this person's work, you're providing input on what they're doing, you're holding one-on-ones, you're signing their time card, whatever it happens to be in your context. You're telling them about strategy, right? Whatever it is. And the younger folks in our workforce have fallen dramatically, a huge decrease in thinking that their supervisor cares about them as a person. 13% drop. And what came along with that is what the workers are telling us. Workers are telling us two important things about communication. Better communication is their primary way that they would like to gain clarity. And 24% said supportive relationships, communication, and respect would help them feel cared about. So, better communication, more respect. These are two really important things called out by the workforce to their leadership. That is the deficit. And if you think about communication and respect, these two things map to feeling cared about, don't they? You take the time to communicate with people you care about. You show respect to people you care about. And so I think the thesis here is really that communication itself is not just about telling someone else about strategy or giving them important information. It's actually kind of the conduit that people feel respect and value through. I mean, if you step back, some of this stuff, it's not rocket science, right? But we're in the nitty-gritty, we're in the grind every day, every week. It's very difficult. I'm raising my hand about it right now. It's very difficult to see beyond what's in front of us sometimes. It's hard to put our head up and take a breath of air sometimes. And that's why we're having this podcast, is to help you improve your leadership wherever you're at on your journey. So let's talk about communication. And I love to think about communication on a scale. A scale, not the kind that you step on to see your own weight. A scale like the scales of justice, right? One half is holding one thing and the other half is holding something else. And trying to find that balance between assertiveness and receptiveness. And what happens is when you as a leader, as a manager, communicate too assertively, it becomes transactional. After COVID, businesses have been on hyperdrive, right? It is about results, results, results. And a lot of the focus on output is a positive thing. Meaning, we now said, a lot of folks were working remotely or hybrid. And we said, well, we need to focus not on butt in seat, right? If you're sitting in your seat all day, that doesn't mean you're doing a good job. Let's focus on output instead. What is the person getting done? I support this idea, right? It's not just being in your seat for a certain number of hours. It's what are you actually doing? But what's the drawback of that, perhaps? As managers, as we think about focusing on what you're doing, output, 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 the communication may soon cater itself to what we're focused on. And that means transactional communication. Where are you with this project? Here's what I need you to do. Here's the latest information. Here's a brief on whatever. Don't do this thing next Friday. Go to this thing next Wednesday, right? Highly transactional communication. And remember, that's kind of a trap because of what we just discussed. Let's rewind here. What did the younger folks in the workforce say? They don't feel like their supervisor cares about them as a person. They feel anonymous, maybe. They feel like a cog in a machine. And yeah, we want to essentially assess people not on the time they spend, but on the results they produce. But that doesn't mean that we treat them like they're a robot and not a human, right? They're not just a cog on an assembly line. They're a human being who's doing work for some organization in pursuit of some goal, objective, mission. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Focus on results and output is good, but we might cater our communication style to this and lose the care. So think again about this scale out of balance. We're focused in a transactional communication, and maybe the other side here that's, sticking straight up in the air because transactional is weighed down. This other side is sticking up here without any weight given to it. And that's what we're talking about today. Why does work matter so much? I talked about the Zach Mercurio thing a second ago, mattering, and how people's work matters and letting them know it. But there's a loneliness epidemic. The Surgeon General recently talked about loneliness. And for a lot of folks, I think particularly of the introvert variety, work is often one of their main places for connection. And when that connection becomes transactional, especially with important people in work, i.e., your manager, engagement starts to suffer. Feelings of not being cared about start to creep up. It's important to acknowledge all this. Okay? So that's kind of where we are. I hope that paints a picture for you. Using this Gallup report as kind of the springboard, and having gone through the engagement numbers last episode, how to better engage folks. But now the idea here is let's remember at the end of the day, it's people communicating with each other. And therefore, let's treat each other like it. I know you've heard it dozens and hundreds of times, but how many times in the context of business have you heard people, leaders, managers talk about how important people are, but the actions don't align with the talk? We've all seen it. And I do believe in 2026, we are at a point where it's more important than ever, probably. That might be hyperbole. I don't like to do that. I've only been alive for so long, right? It's probably as important as ever because of AI. If people are using AI, customer agents, using AI to replace headcount, what's more important than making human beings who are working with us remember they are human beings and that it matters what they're doing, right? It's a big deal, folks. It's a big deal. And there's actually, I'm not going to get into the news story, but as I'm recording this, there's a big old case going between Elon Musk and Sam Altman, for those of you dialed into the world of AI and big business, right? Where they're basically arguing against each other about certain rights to AI. And this is more in the not-for-profit world, but they both basically say that it'll probably lead to the end of civilization or something like this, right? References to the Terminator movies and whatnot. It's a big deal. It's hopefully doesn't happen in our lifetime if it happens at all. But the point I'm trying to get at here is if you're focused on only productivity and you're doing it with computer programs to augment what human beings are doing, fantastic. But if you're just replacing humans with AI, I mean, let's look in the mirror. It's not just about short term. It's not just about margins all the time, right? We have to remember work is one of the 3 things that give you meaning. And being treated like a cog in a machine doesn't provide a foundation for that to feel meaningful. It's so 101 stuff here, folks. But all the greats, all the people who've been great at things, they come back and do the basics well. So here we go. Enough of my evangelizing or whatever you want to call it. Let's focus here on what can people do? And let's do this. Think about communication right now as a relationship tool, okay? So we talked about Gallup and what folks are looking for. They're looking for transparency around strategy and decision making. We've heard this a bunch of times. Here's the small tip for you. When the folks from above tell you the strategy, when the folks above tell you about the next thing that's happening with the business, and your job is to disseminate that, press the pause button and ask a simple 3-letter question. Why? W-H-Y. Not in a snotty, defiant way, why am I doing this? Why am I sharing this information? No. Why are we doing this? Have enough respect for your employees to be the interceptor of that information and understand why it's being done. So now when you turn the other way and you talk to your team about something that's changing in your environment, you can explain the reason why. That's respect. It's not respectful to say, this is what we're doing, and I don't know why, and it's out of my hands. That's not respectful. That gives you all kind of camaraderie around an enemy above you all. Take the time, understand why, so that you can explain that to your team, to your employees. Simple suggestion. Okay? So, ask and then explain why. Number 2, in your one-on-ones or your sync-up meetings, touch bases, whatever you have, spend the first few minutes on the person. You know, what have you been up to outside of work lately? How was your weekend? These seem so simple, but when we jump into the transactional and focus only on the outputs and what needs to be done, as the manager, we can tend to get right to business and be too transactional and not enough on the human care side of things. Remember, the employees are telling us, I don't think you care about me as a human being, manager. Spend a few minutes to ask at the beginning of a one-on-one what's going on with their lives outside of work, okay? Simple. And then third idea for you here would be focusing on development. And Gallup showed a big drop, not quite double digits, but a big drop in someone cares about my development at work. And that's sad, isn't it? To think people are at work all day long, for weeks, months, and years, and they don't think that anyone really is encouraging them to develop new skills. So what you can do is, next time you see your team member, make a point of telling them something that you've seen as a strength during this week. Mention one specific strength. See how it goes. See what the response is. See if they look so appreciative, or maybe they don't. Use that as information. Just taking a few minutes to think about it on your own, and then taking a minute to tell your employee something that you think you've noticed about their strengths. And, I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? So, those are the 3 things to focus on here. Communication to develop a relationship. Number 1, ask why and then explain why. Number 2, spend 5 minutes at the beginning of a one-on-one to ask them about them as a human, not just the work that you're all doing. Third, show appreciation for a strength in one of them during this week for each of your team members. So if we think about it this way, if you give folks clarity around their role and you show care for them as a human being, you are going to get more commitment and engagement out of that employee. Right? If you give them the clarity of expectations that we talked about in the last episodes, but you don't give them any care, you're kind of treating them like a robot. And if you just show them care, but you don't give them any clarity around expectations, you're kind of like, a happy, they're a happy friend that you always listen to, but you're not actually giving them any direction. So giving them both are the keys, I think, to re-engaging the workforce. All right, let's focus on this last thing at the end here. We are just going to wrap it up. So engagement's at 31%, right? It is kind of plateaued over the last 2 years, but I want you to think about it this way, because there are folks in your organization and probably folks on your team who are not engaged. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to stand out from your competition if you treat your folks respectfully and give them that clarity and connection, right? Clear expectations and respectful communication. There's 8 million fewer people engaged here, and you could grab 1 or 2 of them and pull them back on the other side, on the engaged side. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity not only to stand out against your competition, it's a chance for you to develop as a manager. Right? So in order to stand out, you don't have to put all this pressure on yourself. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to nail all this stuff. And that's why every single episode we try to put simple, pragmatic, small things, because small things are what build momentum. So try one of those 3 small things this week. The strength, the question about them outside of work, or the why. It's a small thing, but all you have to do is decide to do it. Okay? So that wraps up our 3-episode series on Gallup's engagement report. I am in the works on what's going to happen in this next phase of season 5, a little different than some of the previous seasons. But in the meantime, I want everybody to take care.